on his way. Devil is on his way. Devil is on his way, motherfucker. The devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way. Fall to your knees. Devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way. Motherfucker, he's on his...
Mountain Murders is an Appalachian true crime podcast. Listener discretion is advised. The show contains graphic language and depictions of violence. It may not be suitable for all audiences.
We say fuck a lot. Hey guys, welcome back to Mountain Murders.
I'm Heather.
And I'm Dylan.
How you doing, Dylan?
Man, I feel really good today.
You do?
Yes, I do.
Is it because you've got that Mountain Dew Kickstart energy fruit punch drink?
Wait a second. Don't tell people my secrets.
That's gross. I can't believe you're drinking that.
Yeah, I can't either. But, you know, it's called Budget Ballin'. That's my cheap energy drink.
That's your knockoff Monster?
Yes.
You have an addiction to those energy drinks. I
know.
think they're so gross.
Yeah, I know. And I think they're making me fatter, even though I drink the sugar-free ones. But that's for another discussion.
Well, that and the fact that you drink a lot of beer.
Well, that's not true. I feel like I drink less beer now than I used to.
He is a damn lie. He does not drink less beer.
Well, I mean, you know, I guess it's all about perspective.
Yeah, well, your perspective is skewed.
So how are you?
I'm not bad. I've had a decent week. We had to wait to record because our redneck neighbors were like revving up their truck engine for 30 minutes before we could get started.
You know, I would say that's like some kid, you know, some 17, 18-year-old kid.
But it's not.
It's like an adult.
It's a grown-ass man over there.
And they just start the truck and they let it idle for, like I were describing to our listeners, the noise that was keeping us from recording. But then they just let it randomly idle for 10 or 15 minutes. And then we get, 2 minutes of revving it full rev.
I know. It's really annoying. I don't know. We need to move away.
You know, I figured
from
out,
this neighborhood.
I think I've said this before, I don't like living in town.
In the city limits?
In city limits.
In town?
Near other people.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah, I need to get up a dirt road.
I have a it's kind of a funny story. Can I share it with you?
Ooh, lay it on my face.
To get us started, this is via the Huffington Post. A top aide to a district attorney in suburban Philadelphia has been demoted because he was caught moonlighting for DoorDash during work hours.
Oh, I was about to say, why can't he do DoorDash, but he's doing it on the clock?
Bucks County prosecutor, his name is Greg Shore, he was demoted because he was working for DoorDash, delivering food during work hours from October to February. And his first salary assignment, he was making about $125,000 a year.
So, well, that's a pretty good pay, a pretty good salary, right?
And he said he primarily started working the job at nights or during the weekends and at night, and that he made a really poor decision to start delivering during the work day. But he said because of COVID-19, it motivated him to start, performing the delivery job more often and was doing it during the work hours.
So here he has a job for $125,000 a year.
Yes.
That's his salary, so he makes that no matter what, right?
Yep.
And I think the only bad thing about salary, sometimes you work a lot of extra hours and don't get comp pay or whatever. But he's kept his job.
Yes.
I'm going to assume he didn't get laid off or any of that.
He kept his job during the pandemic, but that's when he started to work more for DoorDash. And they ended up taking his unused vacation time to, I guess, retrieve lost hours.
Yeah.
To kind of compensate for the money he was making and the time he was spending working for DoorDash. They were able to take that unused vacation time and apply it to the hours he was just out dicking around.
Now, could you imagine if you order some Taco Bell and some very serious man shows up in a
three-piece suit
rather
with
nice
briefcase?
Yeah, with a rather nice car and a three-piece suit and is like, here's your tacos.
Yeah, he arrives and you're like, hey, wait a minute, I know you. You reduced my speeding ticket.
Yeah, didn't you? My cousin Johnny, you let him off with a warning.
Exactly.
Oh my God.
I don't know. I mean, it's kind of a funny story, but it makes me wonder, what his motivation was. Did he desperately need the money, or did he just think he could get away with it?
Yeah, I don't know, but, he's on the taxpayer dime. So, he works for all of the people in that area directly, and he is stealing from them. It's no different than, If you're on company time and you're, doing something off the, something that's not work related.
That's why you poop on company time.
Oh, yeah. You got to have an extended poop on company time.
Yep.
So I work in a hot mill. It's all dusty and steamy and hot. So I know where all the bathrooms with the best air conditioner running in it.
Oh, yeah?
So I can go take what I call a cool poo.
A leisurely poo?
An extended poo.
Thanks for sharing that with us.
Yeah, because, when you're sitting there and you're trying to do your business, I'm not going to be too gross, and you're like in a full-on body sweat, that's just not a very comfortable way to take a poo.
Ew.
Yeah, that's what happens in a hot bathroom.
Gross.
It's like that hot yoga, but it's hot pooping.
You're gross. You're so disgusting.
Well, baby.
I'm filing for divorce.
I'm not even, this isn't being disgusting. This is just being realistic.
Do you think our listeners identify with what you're talking about?
Yeah, well, I guarantee every one of our listeners, male or female, don't want to have a full-on sauna sweat while they're trying to do their business.
My ex worked a job where he was like driving around quite a bit. And so he had like certain spots around town.
Oh, yeah.
Because he was like a private person. And he needed like the private bathroom. So he knew like the local spots to hit where he could find the private bathroom.
I call it the single seater. And I used to put up fences for years all around in, like I said, a 300-mile radius. I knew every convenience store for miles around, no matter what area I was in, that had a single seater. Because I share that same affliction. I've gotten it over it now, being stuck in the mill. When you got to go, you got to go. It don't matter if they're in there having a birthday party. But yeah, I used to do the same thing.
Has that happened before? People have had a birthday party in the bathroom?
Yeah, it doesn't matter what's going on in there. When I got to go, it's going down, bud.
Yeah, I'm in the military. I have zero modesty these days. Yeah. I mean, we used to have to take craps with the no door on the stall.
Ooh.
In front of 80 people.
No.
They called it pump and dump. My veterans out there, you know what I'm talking about.
No, would you look up and like there's that one weird person that's just staring at you while you're pooing?
Yeah, of course.
No.
Yeah.
Oh my God. See, that's just...
I even remember her name.
That's a step too far for me. My
she
body
was a disturbing person.
My body would lock up.
I don't really like her. Are we ready, after we've disgusted our listeners and the few that are still remaining, want to hear a story today? Dylan, are you ready? This is a wild tale.
Welcome to Poo Talk, mountainmurders.com.
Oh, Lord.
Yes, I am ready. I'm very excited to hear your story because I'm kind of familiar with it. And it is an insane tale of, how would you describe it? Power, manipulation.
A con artist.
And corruption.
Yeah.
And just
as your bowels have been moved by the Holy Spirit, we are going to be talking about religion, occult, all sorts of stuff today.
Oh, so it sounds like we need to get into it. But before we get started, I would like to thank our newest patron, Dave. Thank you very much, Dave, for supporting us on patreon.com/mountainmurders. And I would also like to make a name correction because I hate to get people's names wrong. Mikal, I hope I said that right. We thank you for being a patron. And Tamara, I do believe I butchered her name as well.
Yeah, you've often been called Nylon, so you really don't like it when someone incorrectly pronounces your name.
No, growing up, Dylan wasn't as popular as now. And I just don't understand why people couldn't get it. Because, there was Dylan Thomas, the poet, and Bob Dylan. But I've been called Dylon.
Diane.
Various other butcherings of my simple name. So I do apologize for butchering people's names.
Yeah, I can't remember where I was, but I had some paperwork or something, and it had both of our names listed, and someone called you Diane.
Diane?
Yeah.
Well, that's a new one.
I was like, well...
Maybe
my husband Diane and I are very interested in your product.
Maybe if I transition, that'll be my transition name. Okay.
Are you ready?
Yes.
Let's do this. The 1960s were a time of turmoil with the U.S. government's military intervention in Vietnam, along with the civil rights movements. An anti-establishment counterculture spread throughout the Western world, specifically in the United States. Widespread social tensions flowed along generational lines regarding human sexuality, women's rights, and feelings of rebellion against authority. Many turned to experimentation with psychoactive drugs, and the ideas of the American dream were shaken. The 1960s were also a time for spiritual awakening, when many pushed back against their more traditional upbringings in search of enlightenment.
Yeah, I'm sure this was a very interesting time and kind of a scary time to live in, because everything was changing in some pretty major ways, generational changes. I think that's kind of what's happening nowadays in our weird 2021 version of it.
The age of Aquarius.
Yeah, just a big shift in the ideals of the previous generation compared to the generation now.
Agreed. So one of the most famous and publicly recognizable religious movements to spark in the 1960s was the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, ISKCON, as it was called. The practice is Kirtan, a congregational chanting or singing of the Hare Krishna mantra. It's both a way to express devotion to God and a way to attract newcomers to the movement. Devotees gather in public, in streets, and in parks to sing the mantra, accompanied by instruments like the hand cymbals and the harmonium. And during the 1970s, ISKCON entered the public eye because of this practice. Devotees would sing, they would distribute books, and proselytize in airports and other public areas, often considered obtrusive by others. Gaudiya Vaishnavism. So I'm going to butcher this.
Ooh.
I apologize. I'm country.
I believe that was perfect pronunciation.
Okay. Well, Gaudiya Vaishnavism started in Bengal with the practice of love of God to dedicate thoughts and actions toward Krishna, the Supreme Lord. The scripture of the Bhagavad Gita is considered one of the main holy scriptures for Hinduism and is the world's oldest religion. The Bhagavad Gita was written in Sanskrit in the 2nd century BCE.
So a very, very long time ago.
Old religion, yeah, world's oldest religion.
I think anyone, especially anywhere near our age, we're right there around 40. Let's say I'm 40. Oh my God, my birthday's coming up. I'm getting so old. But I think any one of us can picture what a Hare Krishna looks like. Because when we were growing up, it's kind of a part of pop culture. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, typically they would have the shaved heads.
And the
long,
robes.
Goldish, orange colored robe, often singing in airports.
Yes, and it was often portrayed in movies that way. They were kind of, just a part of the street scene in movies and things like that, airports.
I think in the recent memory, something that comes to mind is I was a big fan of the show Mad Men. And one of the characters on the show who was like one of the advertising writers, he's kind of like a beatnik guy, and I can't think of his name offhand, but he ends up like joining a Hare Krishna temple in New York City and like leaves the ad world.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never watched Mad Men.
So that's what I think of with the Hare Krishnas, is that guy. Keith Gordan Ham was born September 6, 1937 in Peekskill, New York, which is about 90 miles north of New York City. He was the fifth and last child of the Ham family. His father, Francis, was a conservative Baptist preacher who was borderline obsessed with religion. He believed all other denominations were pagan and one could only come to Christ through the Baptist teachings. Everything in the Ham household revolved around prayer and worship. They had a strict regimen of worship, and the kids were not allowed to believe in Santa or the Easter Bunny.
Oh, poor little kids.
Francis and his wife Marjorie wanted everybody to view their family in a certain way. They were very concerned with appearances.
Well, that always puts undue pressure on anyone who's overly concerned. I mean, I understand thinking now and again, what will people think about this? But I've never lived my life, but I don't care what people think, other people, especially people I don't know, think about me, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
I think we both agree on that.
I have a handful of people I truly value their opinion, but at the same time, I don't try to harm I don't try to affect others with the way I live my life. But that's just some people just worry themselves to death about that.
Like keeping up with the Joneses and having a certain image.
Yes, there's a very funny British comedy, Keeping Up Appearances, that is all about this, and it's hilarious. But it's crazy to me.
Well, for Frances, showcasing a perfect Christian household was key, while Marjorie wanted everyone to recognize how lovely her family was, especially little Keith. She doted on him, always bragging about what a smart and special child he was. Keith developed a narcissistic personality fairly young. He was described as a charismatic child. He was often known to exaggerate and felt the need to impress others.
Oh, do you have any of those feelings? Have you ever had any of those feelings growing up?
That I needed to impress other people?
Yeah.
No, I had the exact opposite of those feelings.
Well, yeah, you've always been like trying to get the hell away from people.
I'm very antisocial, and I recognize that's probably a personality disorder, but it was never to impress people. It was always just like, I'm going to do my own thing, and I don't give a fuck what anybody else thinks.
Yeah, I think the exaggeration, and trying to make it embellish everything, make it bigger, cooler than it really is probably part of maybe the narcissism to a degree.
Well, and I think in some ways it's an insecurity.
Well, yeah, I would agree with that.
I think a lot of narcissists are extremely insecure. I'm no psychologist, but of the folks I've encountered in my life who seem to have this personality and are very narcissistic and really care what other people think about them are also deeply insecure people.
Yes, we actually have a listener. I will not name her. We may consult her on this because she probably knows.
Yeah. Keith spent much of his childhood and youth trying to convert classmates to his religious beliefs. His mother would say he was chosen by God to be a great leader. However, Keith was also temperamental and often violent. With his sense of entitlement, anytime it was challenged, he would become irrational, usually angry, then violent.
Yeah.
Because it was like Keith's way or the highway. Throughout high school, Keith was considered a sickly boy. And by 1952, Keith had transferred to several different schools after extended periods of recuperation from various illnesses. It was during this time that he was attending various boarding schools that Keith began to recognize his homosexuality. In 1953, Keith was diagnosed with poliomyelitis, which is polio as we know it today.
Oh, really?
He did make a full recovery, but he was left with a limp. He enrolled at Peekskill High School from Stony Brook, which was a boarding school where he'd previously attended. And while at Peekskill, students kind of took pity on him because he had the limp, he had polio, he was kind of sickly. But he became a popular student. He joined the debate club and was a member of the Honor Society. It was in high school that Keith started drinking and questioning God. He still managed to produce excellent grades, despite the fact that he was drinking pretty heavily and partying quite a bit, though his parents had no inkling that he was like living this sort of double life.
Oh, so they kind of have this picture of their child, and he's this certain way, but
this golden child.
Yeah.
And he's making excellent grades, and he's popular, and he's active in, student clubs and councils, but on the flip side, he's drinking, partying, like excessively drinking, not just like having a beer here and there.
Yeah, I'm kind of wondering how, I guess every family's different, how you miss some of that. You know what I mean? Like, not notice him hungover.
I knew kids in high school who were kind of leading that same double life. Like, I had a friend, and she was, of course, a preacher's daughter. And she was kind of wild. And one of my, wilder friends and was doing things that I would have never dared to do.
Yeah, I mean, I guess...
but got away with it. And I would think, do her parents not know that she's, sneaking out and drinking and fornicating?
Yeah, I mean, you never smell the alcohol on them. You never see them looking like a bag of warmed up buttholes. You know what I mean?
Also, it makes me wonder, his parents were so concerned with appearances that maybe they were a bit in denial as well.
Well, I was about to say that very thing, that could be a possibility because they won't even admit it to themselves when they do see these little hints.
By the time graduation rolled around, he knew he no longer wanted to be a Baptist preacher, which was kind of his goal from early childhood. So he took off for Maryville College in Knoxville, Tennessee, which is about the furthest he could get away from New York. After enrolling at the small liberal arts school, Keith had some kind of falling out with his parents, particularly with his dad, when he was caught smoking.
Ooh.
So that's the kicker? The smoking?
He's just out there with his white T-shirt with the sleeves rolled up, leaning up on the wall like James Dean with the one foot up on the wall. And his dad comes out and he's like, "Oh my God, Keith, what are you doing?
Is that a lucky strike?
Is that a lucky strike?
Unfiltered?"
Oh my God. And he's got the Zippo and he's doing Zippo tricks. You ever know the people that had lighter stuff they do with the lighter? I've always felt like, why you spend so much time with your lighter, dude?
I don't know. It's like people who can do yo-yo tricks. At what point do you decide that that's going to be your hobby?
Well, I mean, that's pretty dope, though.
It is. I've got yo-yo fans out there fuck you. He rejected his parents and their religious teachings and became financially independent from them. Keith embraced being a gay man. While he was at Maryville, he excelled. He graduated in 1959 with honors. He was first in his class and got a BA in history.
See, that's what's interesting. He's doing these things, kind of what he wants to do on the side, but he's also keeping all his grades up. He's at the top academically, so that's pretty interesting.
He was awarded the Woodrow Wilson Fellowship to study U.S. history at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. Keith was doing well in graduate school and began hanging out at a local gay bar where he met a lifelong friend and lover, a man named Howard Morton Wheeler. The pair became inseparable. In 1961, they were called to appear before a school board to answer for their homosexual relationship.
That's pretty wild.
Again, it's the 60s, it's the South, the Bible Belt. They're living like a pretty openly gay lifestyle.
Well, I mean, I remember the 90s. You can watch any 90s movie and be like, ooh, it's pretty, some of the comedy or humor is pretty cringy, even though I have dark, humor and all that. And the gays caught hell, even up through the 90s, in my opinion. Stuff still happens, but I think nowadays that's one thing we've gotten right to a degree is just, in my viewpoint, you get to do what you want.
Being more accepting of differing lifestyles and sexuality.
You can live your life however you want.
As it should be. People should be able to be who they want to be without question.
It's true.
Instead of coming in to answer for their homosexual relationship, Keith was just like, fuck it, and left school.
Oh, so he's like, I've had enough of this. And, I kind of don't blame him in that regard. I mean, really.
He and Howard fled to New York City. It was there that the pair welcomed a lifestyle filled with debauchery. The couple had an open sexual relationship, imbibing lots of alcohol and using drugs, particularly psychedelics like LSD. Keith even considered himself to be somewhat of an LSD guru.
Ooh.
Let me take you on a trip.
Yeah.
What is it? Tune in, drop out?
I don't know, but and they were on that pure LSD back then. I mean, that was the real deal, right?
He found work as an unemployment claims reviewer, and he ended up enrolling at Columbia University, where he received the Waddell Fellowship.
Wow, so that's a pretty amazing that he can, he was already on kind of a scholarship, right? At the other one.
He was on a fellowship at UNC, a Woodrow Wilson Fellowship.
Yeah, so, and then he just turns right around, can drop out and be like, screw you guys, I'm going home, and then turn around and get it again. So, I mean...
Yeah, there's no disputing that Keith is a very intelligent man.
Well, I think that intelligence will be obvious during the whole story, even though it gets rather dark.
At Columbia, Keith found himself spinning his wheels. He was not doing as well as he had previously. His drug use and sex addiction were spiraling out of control. Wheeler was beginning to seek some type of spiritual enlightenment. His coworker suggested that he travel to India. So by 1965, Keith gave up academic life to travel with his lover to India in search of a guru. About 6 months in India, the pair spent searching for a guru. They didn't have any luck.
So during this time period, that was becoming rather popular, right? The idea of a guru, and I guess yoga was also on the rise. It has its roots there in India. So this kind of alternative spiritualism, is that how you would call it? Is that what you would call it?
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, something that's just outside of the normal and, stuff these people's parents never, mentioned, or but they were pretty, pretty basic on their religious ideals.
So Keith and Howard are having their eat, pray, love moment.
So they're just in India kicking it for 6 months.
Yeah, and pretty soon the money ran out, so they had to return to New York City after about 6 months. When they returned to New York, they met Bengali Gaudiya Vaishnava, known as Prabhupada. And he was the founder of ISKCON. Now, the two began attending the Bhagavad Gita classes at 26 2nd Avenue in Manhattan's Lower East Side. Following the Swami as a spiritual master, the two became some of the first disciples to shave their heads, wear the golden-colored robes that we know today, and move into the temple full time. September 22nd of 1966, Keith became initiated as Kirtananda. He was considered to be the first and most senior disciple. Regarded as a disciplined follower, he woke early to take cold showers, attended all temple services, and he began preparing vegetarian meals. His debate skills and ability to preach were excellent, as he was a scholar of both the Bhagavad Gita and the Christian Bible.
Yeah, so this is almost serendipitous in many ways that they meet him, the Swami, as soon as they get back to New York. Because here you have these two people who are serious enough to go to India for months and kind of just, backpack around and looking for a spiritual leader or someone looking for enlightenment. And then they get back to New York City and they meet this guy who is the very thing they were looking for the entire time.
And because Keith was the scholar of both the Bhagavad Gita and the Christian Bible, he was considered undefeatable in arguments.
Yeah, and so even from the Swami's perspective, he's found two of the most perfect disciples to be his first disciples. So, I guess he's like, oh, wow, if everybody could be as knowledgeable and devout as these two, this is going to go great for me.
Wheeler became known as Hayagriva. Some of the 4 principles of Krishna were eating no meat, no intoxicants, no sex unless you were married, and no gambling. So both Kirtananda and Hayagriva were taught personally by Prabhupada, becoming essentially his right hands. And by 1967, Prabhupada had returned to India with Kirtananda, where he actually suffered a stroke. So while in India, Prabhupada named Kirtananda a Swami, and he ordered Kirtananda to go to London, where he wished to open another Hare Krishna temple. But instead, Kirtananda defied his leader, returning to New York City. Once he was back in New York City, he attempted to take over the temple. He told Prabhupada's followers that the old man was sick, so he was going to be in charge from now on. But the power grab failed, as word got back to Prabhupada. And through letters, Prabhupada denounced Kirtananda, calling him crazy.
Yeah, well, I think that's his narcissism, kind of coming to the forefront there. He's like, I can do better. I'm smarter than my guru. And he saw an opportunity and he tried to take it.
The New York Hare Krishnas tossed him out. And once he was kicked out of ISKCON, he started the First United Church of Krishna Underground, which the acronym was Fuck You.
I love it when people come up with good acronyms.
He's so petty, right? Despite Kirtananda's belief that ISKCON would falter without his presence, the church grew without him. In 1967, temples were opened in London and San Francisco. George Harrison from the Beatles became involved in ISKCON. Hayagriva had gone to a remote school in Pennsylvania to teach. So while Kirtananda was licking his wounds, he discovered an ad in a San Francisco publication touting 1,200 acres free to anyone who wanted to develop a religious center in West Virginia.
Oh, wow. I want those 1,200 acres.
Journalist Richard Rose Jr. owned a lot of property outside of Moundsville, West Virginia. His hope was to find someone who'd develop a religious center for all practices. Keith and Howard dressed nicely in their best civilian attire, planning a road trip to West Virginia where they would meet with Rose. Upon leasing the land to the men, Kirtananda knew he needed to reach out to Prabhupada for help. He needed the backing of ISKCON, and as much as it pained him to have to admit he was wrong and apologize, he actually swallowed his pride.
So he's asking for forgiveness, basically. But look, I have this new opportunity. We have all this land where we can, have this sprawling commune or whatever you want to call it. And so, yeah, he went back and asked for him to kind of take back over. Is that it?
Well, Prabhupada agreed to a meeting at the Montreal temple where he was staying at the time. However, when they arrived in Montreal, Prabhupada refused to see him, and this was much to Keith's dismay. So after some groveling, Prabhupada finally sat down with his former pupil. Kirtananda was able to show the Swami plans for a sanctuary with a great palace in his honor. So with ISKCON's backing, Kirtananda was named the Maharaji, which means prince. So these two former nemesis, if you will, Nemesis. How would you say that in plural?
Oh, I
So
have no
these
idea.
two end up forging a relationship once again in order to develop this farmland in West Virginia.
So I guess the guru is got to have some of these same qualities of narcissism, this grandiose view of your inflated ego of himself, because it sounds like Keith just played that those very qualities because he knows him and he's very smart, and he's like, yeah, I know I tried to usurp you and take over, what you created, but here, I can do this.
Let me dazzle you with this grand palace in your honor.
Let me honor
you.
Yeah.
When Rose saw Kirtananda and Hayagriva return with their shaved heads and golden robes, he knew immediately that he'd made a mistake. He was pretty angry about the monotheistic project because his intention was to include all religions. But the contract, it was already signed. Rose told Kirtananda, I will sue you. I have a good lawyer. To which Kirtananda replied, ours are better.
Wow, so he's expecting some kind of new age, all-accepting religion that is basically non-denominational, right?
Yeah.
Maybe the newest iteration of that's the Unitarian Church or something like that. But yeah, and so he's pissed because he knows that they're doing the whole Hare Krishna thing.
Right.
And he's well aware of what the Hare Krishna are.
New Vrindaban, as it was called, was the new community in West Virginia. Prabhupada placed Kirtananda in charge and told subjects they were to obey him as a leader. So many Krishna followers were sent to help establish New Vrindaban. I will get this right. So throughout the late 60s and into the early 70s, construction projects created a farm and shelters. Kirtananda told the followers he would reward them for their loyalty, though some still questioned him after the attempted coup in New York. They built 2 temples, cultivated a large farm, and established a school. But it was no paradise. The Krishnas were not welcomed by outsiders or by the locals. West Virginia was still considered the Bible Belt, and the locals saw the Krishnas as like freaks and weirdos.
Well, yeah, I mean, you got these people who they're different religions than you. I'm sure most of them are quite younger.
They're hippies.
They're hip. They got the whole hippie thing going on, and that stigma because people thought a certain way about hippies and all that. So yeah, it's a lot. And then on top of that, it's small town, small area, and everyone knows everyone. And now you have just strangers everywhere.
In 1972, Kirtananda proposed the Palace of Gold be built. It was a big endeavor to create a face or like a landmark for the movement. Though Kirtananda was the leader, Hayagriva was being sloppy around New Vrindaban. The men were supposed to be celibate, and Hayagriva was having sex with the migrant workers and others around the compound, much to Kirtananda's dismay. And the followers noticed too, and would often mention it to their leader.
Yeah, so they're like, you're not even living by the beliefs of our religion or what we're trying to do here.
June 5th of 1973, a motorcycle gang entered the New Vrindaban property with guns blazing. 3 followers were shot. The gang managed to capture Kirtananda. They took him to a hill and made him dig a grave. And just before he would be murdered, the Marshall County Sheriff's Office had been called, and they intervened, saving Kirtananda's life.
Where the hell did the vicious motorcycle gang come from? I mean, that's a wild story.
It is a wild story. Well, this incident left Kirtananda shaken. He reached out to Prabhupada for answers. Surprisingly, Prabhupada told him they needed to fight fire with fire. If they were to be met with violence, it was important to arm and protect themselves from these outsiders.
Yeah, so here you go. This happens a lot, and when you have everyone's kind of against this mentality, and you can take a cult or whatever you want to call it, and they have good intentions at first, but once they get that idea in their head, and they bring in the weapons and things like that, and start having kind of basically a private army, that's when it always goes sideways.
Let's pause for a moment and take a quick break, Dylan. Thomas Drescher, a follower, had a military background, and he had served in Vietnam. Kirtananda brought him in as personal security guard and enforcer for New Vrindaban. They purchased guns, ammunition. Drescher began teaching the others how to use the weapons, shoot, and how to defend the compound if it was ever raided again.
Yeah, some paramilitary training.
So starting like a Krishna army.
Yeah, and it's not even, you take someone who's any good at all and took to the training they had in the military. It's very easy for them to take that and just get a group of anybody and give them the basics, the basic tactics and things of military training. MS-13 is famous for doing this with their criminal organization.
On November 14th of 1977, Prabhupada died in India. He left no successor in charge of ISKCON. Rather, he told 12 of his disciples to co-govern the organization. Shortly after Prabhupada's death, Kirtananda's own father, Francis, passed away. Kirtananda took both the loss of his father and of Prabhupada very hard. I mean, it was devastating. It was basically like losing both of his father figures. Instead of internal fights with other ISKCON disciples, Kirtananda took the opportunity to seize power, establishing himself as supreme leader. New members were signing over their life savings to him, and the Krishnas got creative in financing their endeavors. As I mentioned before, once their tactic had been to target airports and ask for donations, but Kirtananda knew there had to be a better way. And it was during this time that he also realized with his position as supreme leader, he could get away with anything. So in order to test this theory, he went to the property's school and requested 2 11-year-old boys. He brought them back to his home, telling the 2 boys to take a shower together.
Oh my God.
When he realized no one was going to stop him, Kirtananda began preying on young boys at New Vrindaban. He took on the title of Bhaktapad.
What does that mean, asshole?
Bhaktapad? I mean, I think that means like I'm the supreme leader. So he starts going by the name Bhaktapad.
Yeah, well, that's insane, and that's no surprise that he took seized control, because that's always been in his mind. He's already tried to do it before in the past, and in a way, from the very inception of what he's done here in West Virginia, he's been the leader in his mind, I'm sure.
Well, he's been told from the time he was a small child, like, you were chosen by God to be this great religious leader, a great spiritual leader, by his own mother. So it's been ingrained in him.
Wow, I forgot about that.
So he really has a sense of entitlement and thinks that he was chosen by God.
Yeah, and I mean, there's many other ways he could have tested this theory or his power, but preying on young children is obviously the worst choice he could have made.
Well, we'll see. There's a lot of that. I mean, the guy's a creep. By 1979, the Palace of Gold was complete. Kirtananda had become the public face of the movement, and the palace was going to be a destination. It cost $600,000 to build, which is about $2.1 million by today's money. It featured 31 hand-stained glass windows, crystal chandeliers, mirrored ceilings, 52 varieties of marble and onyx, mostly imported from Europe, beautiful murals, 4,200 pieces of semi-precious gemstones, and pure gold walls and pillars.
Wow, that sounds necessary. You know, when you have that, you compare money from then to now. I think the buying power of the dollar was a lot stronger as well. So I think $600,000 then went way further than 2.1 million would on a construction project nowadays. Because here locally in our county, they spent $3 or $4 million on an animal shelter.
Yeah,
and it doesn't have golden walls. So, I mean, this just sounds very ornate and just way over the top.
Well, it looks absolutely beautiful. I mean, the photos, and I will post some of the photos on our social media accounts on Instagram. You can go check those out. Well, later that year in December, a boy who lived at New Vrindaban, I will get it right, I promise. He told his mother that he'd been chosen by the Bhaktapad for something really special. The boy described how the supreme leader had touched his private parts, and how he was chosen by Krishna for this special honor. His mother scoffed at the child's claims. There was no way in her mind that the supreme leader could ever do something like that.
See, that very scenario has been played out in many different religions, many different settings, but the same exact scenario. You have the child who feels proud and special. He's been groomed by this predator to do this. He's not even, probably upset about it. And then you have parents or other people around the child who don't believe the child because they have this view of the predator that they could never do this. It's very sad and disgusting.
It is very sad, and I think that's behavior we see in a lot of cults.
Yes.
Bhaktapad opened New Vrindaban to the public for tours. He figured it would aid in recruiting new members and that the organization could make money from the visitors by selling them publications. He bought a printing press to create Krishna materials. June 9th of 1983, a man named Charles St. Denis disappeared from the New Vrindaban community. St. Denis was considered somewhat of a fringe member. He was married and had 4 children, along with a wife who was living at the commune. But St. Denis was known to use drugs, which was strictly forbidden by the Krishnas. St. Denis had been caught growing marijuana on the farm and ordered not to do this. Then a man named Dan Reed had came forward with a story that his wife had been sexually assaulted by St. Denis. Thomas Drescher, he's the head enforcer, he told Bhaktapad what had happened. So with the blessing of the supreme leader, Drescher lured St. Denis to a remote cabin on the property with the promise of cocaine.
Oh, I know we've been telling you how you shouldn't do drugs, but, I want you to come out here in this dark cabin and check out this really, really good cocaine I got. It's fresh in from Miami.
Instead, he was beaten with a hammer, stabbed with a screwdriver, then shot 10 to 12 times. The rumor was that he was then wrapped in logging chains and dropped in a lake on the property. But really, Drescher buried St. Denis in a shallow grave and then poured acid over the grave.
Well, that sounds like a vicious murder of him, right? I mean, my God, beat with a hammer and shot multiple times. And I guess at some point he was like, this ain't how I do cocaine.
Well, however, the real reason that Bhaktapad had okayed this revenge killing was more personal. Shortly before his death, St. Denis had caught Bhaktapad and Hayagriva engaged in a sex act, which of course was forbidden. For years, it was like 4 years, the St. Denis family had not heard from their missing loved one. So his parents and family in California wrote letters, mailing them to West Virginia, but never got a response. Bhaktapad would later deny having ever seen any letters addressed to St. Denis. Soon after St. Denis was reported missing, and I said St. Denis and St. Denis, I'm not really sure how you say his last name. He was reported missing by his wife, so the Marshall County Sheriff began investigating. Of course, they'd heard all kinds of rumors about what was going on at New Vrindaban. So days after St. Denis went missing, the farmhouse where he had lived was burned down.
Really?
Eliminating any kind of evidence that might have been left behind.
And that's what it sounds like.
And Bhaktapad collected the insurance money.
Man, he's just got now, I would think after he basically ordered a hit or okayed a hit on this guy, and it's been carried out faithfully by his security enforcer. So I'd say at this point, his ego and his idea of being in control is like just inflated to the degree you couldn't even imagine. He probably feels untouchable.
There were also some rumors that one of the reasons why St. Denis had been killed, or St. Denis had been killed, was because he had received a rather large inheritance and refused to share it with Bhaktapad.
So he expected him, St. Denis, to sign over everything like every other member.
Yeah.
Sell your home. And, a lot of times people's like, how do these cults do this? Get a chunk of land and build. I mean, just feeding that many people on a daily basis and clothing, housing them is very expensive. And then they build these lavish, certain structures and altars and all this. And that's the thing. They expect you to liquidate your life, sell your home, access any kind. And they also a lot of times will be on social services any way they can be, food stamps, monthly checks for children, things like that. And if you get hundreds of people together and they're willing to liquidate their lives basically and pull all that money together, it doesn't take long before you have millions of dollars to operate with.
It's true. Well, during this time, Bhaktapad began incorporating some aspects of Christianity into the Hare Krishna practice at New Vrindaban. And this was in hopes of recruiting new members. When word got back to ISKCON leaders, they were not pleased. This went against the teachings of Prabhupada. But Bhaktapad broke away from the protocols, seeing this as the best tool for moving forward. He began hardcore fundraising efforts. Instead of the traditional airport stuff, he would send members out to community events like football games, festivals, and they would be dressed in like civilian clothing, and they would write citations for things like having too much fun.
So this random stranger comes up to you and talking about you're getting ticketed for having too much fun?
Yeah, and then they would ask for a donation to pay off the citation.
Oh, so were they doing it in kind of a joking way?
It was like a playful thing.
A way to make contact with a person, get them talking. So what he's doing is is very smart from a marketing perspective, is he's opening up, they're getting many more opportunities to make contact with the public in different settings. And instead of just being like, oh, there's those kooky Hare Krishna, let me hurry past them in the airport and ignore them, I'm sure it probably created a lot more revenue.
Like, here's a guy in parachute pants giving me a ticket for just being too cool for school.
He said I was too handsome, and he tried to give me a $50 ticket, and I was like, that's pretty cool, dude, because I know I'm, like, really handsome, and so I gave him $5.
They would ask for donations to fake charities. Then they started a scheme where they began selling unlicensed bumper stickers and other merchandise, which featured, like, Snoopy and NFL team logos.
Ooh. They're messing with some big boys on that, merchandising.
And this brought in tons of money. In 1981, they reportedly made about $2 million. And by 1985, it was $5.4 million.
Wow.
This, of course, was more than enough to pay the bills at New Vrindaban. So Bhaktapad was pocketing the rest of the money. The con man was making millions, and none of the followers seemed to question any of this.
And so
finances, none of it.
And that's pretty wild, but it's a slow burn to get them to this point. It's been pointed out to me and you before by listeners. Sometimes we're like, how does this happen? And it doesn't happen overnight. It happens over a long time. And when you truly believe and have unquestionable faith in something, I guess I could see how you end up in this position.
With no one to stop Bhaktapad, he began having late-night orgies with Hayagriva and other males. He would make trips to the school and pick out boys who were tasked with helping him. And it was a real honor for these boys to be chosen. Some noticed how affectionate Bhaktapad seemed to be with young boys, but no one dared to say anything about it. Children were describing molestation to their parents, though many dismissed the claims as, kids have active imaginations. Some parents left with their children after hearing the stories. Like, it was enough to get people to leave.
Well, and that's good for the parents who did get the hell out of there. And one thing I think we have to say is some people, especially country folk, might equate pedophilia with being gay, and they're not the same. You take a gay person who, is with, other consenting adults and things like that, that's what being gay is. But a pedophile is a pedophile. He just happens to be gay. Would you agree?
Yes.
Yes. I just had to say that.
A police state had formed among the followers, so Bhaktapad rewarded those who gave up information on others. So followers had begun spying on one another and turned each other in over infractions that were often fabricated or made up. And this seems to be a method among a lot of cults.
Yes. I think any cult you listen to that has any kind of longevity that lasts for years, this is true. It keeps internal, it's divide and conquer. It's the same theory as that.
In October of 1985, during a bricklaying marathon, a devotee named Michael Shockman attacked Bhaktapad on the head with a steel tamping tool. So Bhaktapad was in a coma for 10 days, suffering a blood clot on the brain. Afterwards, he experienced deafness in one ear, memory loss, and equilibrium issues. So those who had known Kirtananda or Bhaktapad beforehand said that he seemingly had a change in personality after this head injury.
So do we know why? What the altercation was about? Why this man attacked him?
Well, from what I gathered through research, Shockman had wanted to like become a leader, and I guess he felt that Bhaktapad wasn't doing what he was supposed to do, and then just sort of had a snap moment and attacked him.
Okay, well, not that it makes it okay, but I didn't know if it was maybe, something connected to a child or anything like that. But he basically wanted to be in upper management.
Yeah, and it seems like he might have been troubled anyway.
Okay.
Already, and then he wanted to like be a leader and felt like maybe if he attacked the leader, he could take over. I'm not really sure.
Shit, it's like keep what you kill.
Follower Steve Bryant, known as Sulakana, joined New Vrindaban in 1981 with his wife Jane. And Jane was a dedicated Krishna devotee. She was described as being a submissive type of woman anyway, and she didn't seem to mind the fact that women at the compound were treated as second-class citizens. Women were often told who to marry, ordered by Kirtananda or Bhaktapad, who they were going to sleep with, who they were going to marry. Like they were just told what to do. And husbands were allowed to beat their wives into submission. And this was fine. This was considered perfectly fine behavior.
Well, unfortunately, even outside of this this commune, that women were treated in a bad way, and is meant to be submissive to their husband and things like that.
Women were expected to follow orders. They were to worship in the back of the temple and had little to no say in choices regarding their families. New Vrindaban was definitely a patriarchal society. Narcissists like Bhaktavad want to dominate anyone they see as a challenge, and he particularly disliked any strong female.
Well, I was going to say, even given that he is gay, that probably may even make that even worse. Like, he doesn't even want to interact with women sexually or things like that. He don't want to surround himself. So he really has no problem just pushing them to the back of the bus and are treating them like dirt in any opportunity.
Yeah, and it seemed like he definitely preyed on any woman that he felt like was a challenge to him.
Yeah, and again, there's
his goal was like to break her.
His narcissism.
After gossip had begun spreading through the commune about St. Denis' murder, as well as stories of child molestation, Steve Bryant grew very concerned. He had 2 sons with his wife, and he had seen behaviors out of the supreme leader that were very questionable. He just couldn't bear the thought that something might happen to his sons. So one night, he loaded the kids up in his rusty 76 Dodge van and driving with the 3- and 5-year-old as fast as he could, trying to create as much distance between himself and the Krishnas. When he absolutely had to stop off for gasoline and diapers, members of New Vrindaban, along with Jane, his wife, jumped out of the van with guns, and they held Brian at gunpoint, kidnapping the children and taking them back to the compound.
So they were in hot pursuit as soon as he left, she probably alerted them, hey, he just took my boys, and they go after them.
Yeah.
And as soon as he stops, there they are. Wow, could you imagine how scared he is?
No, and he had really tried to make sure he wasn't being tailed. I mean, from what I understand, like, he goes in the store, comes out, and they've got guns in his face, and he's just like, where the hell did they come from?
Yeah,
They're
and so
like ninjas.
How torn this man must feel. And I'm sure he told his wife probably, we need to get the hell out of here, but she sounds like she's a devotee. She's devoted to Hare Krishna and this whole system, and maybe doesn't believe him. They may have had some discussions, but he just wants to get his sons the hell out, and but also at the same time be worried for your woman, your wife, and could you care for her, but she won't join you in protecting your children. I can't imagine what's going through his head.
Well, after this, Steve Bryant dedicated his energy to exposing Bhaktavad. He moved to Los Angeles, where he penned a newsletter comparing Moundsville to Jonestown. He detailed Bhaktavad's fascination with young boys. He sought out letters and teachings of Prabhupada through the members of ISKCON. Though some of the ISKCON leaders in Los Angeles denied him access to this information, one member took pity on him and smuggled out copies for him to have. Reading through Prabhupada's letters, Steve realized that Bhaktavad was violating teachings. Prabhupada clearly stated that no one, including the Swami, had a right to interfere in marital relationships, which clearly Bhaktavad had done.
See, I find this a very, very fascinating part of the story. This is how driven he is, and there is actually this record of how you say it?
Prabhupada?
Prabhupada?
Yeah.
Prabhupada's teachings and contacts with, gosh, I don't know how you're doing all these names, with Keith. I'm going to call him Keith. And it's direction straight from the guru's mouth. And there's actually a record of it. But like you said, that they're like, no, you can't have access to this. But he knows that maybe, if he brings this to light, these private letters, that other members of the commune there will believe, be like, oh, wow, this could be the thing that breaks it open for him.
Steve copied Prabhupada's letters and sent those along with his accusations to ISKCON chapters worldwide. Ex-followers began contacting Steve and helped him compile evidence against the supreme leader. Stories emerged about child abuse, pedophilia, and drug smuggling. After publishing The Guru Business, Steve began receiving death threats.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure they're pissed at now because he's doing this in a very public way.
It was around 1 a.m. on May 22nd of 1986 that Steve was sitting in his van about a half a mile from the ISKCON temple in Los Angeles, rolling a joint, when he was approached by a gunman. 2 bullets entered through the driver's side window at close range. 1 bullet entered through his left jawbone area and hit the carotid artery and went through the cervical spine. The second bullet passed clear through his left cheek and out the other side of his face. Steve Bryant was dead.
Yeah, there's no way you're going to survive that.
The gunman? None other than Thomas Drescher, Bhaktapad's enforcer. Now, immediately, Drescher drove his rental car to the LAX airport and flew to Dallas. News made its way very quickly to New Vrindaban, where members actually celebrated Steve Bryant's death.
And that's how brainwashed they are. They think he's a threat to what they're doing there.
His ex-wife, Jane, was shocked to hear the news. One of the most senior disciples to Bhaktapad was a man named Richard Slavin, and he was asked by devotees if he'd known who had killed Bryant. And his response was, and I quote, "I don't know who did it, but whoever it was, he was doing devotional service to Krishna."
That's a very strange way to say that.
From Dallas, Thomas Drescher flew to Cleveland, Ohio, where he met his wife and son and spent the night sleeping in their trailer park home to catch up on rest. The next day, he drove down to Columbus, Ohio to attend a Festival of India that was sponsored by Ohio State University. He told some of the New Vrindaban members who were also at the festival about the murder. Then he phoned Randall Gorby, who was another close companion of Bhaktapad, to inquire about $8,000 that he'd been promised for carrying out the murder.
So he's done his part, and now he wants his money.
According to a wiretapped phone call between the two, Gorby instructed Drescher to fly to India with his wife and child, where a wealthy follower of Bhaktapad would cover their lodging.
I don't think I would go to India. I don't know if I would trust them at this point, because you're a loose end.
After Bryant's murder, ISKCON began distancing itself from New Vrindaban. It was obvious to the Marshall County Sheriff's Department, along with the LAPD, that the murder had been a professional hit of some kind. Because the murder plot seemingly went across state lines, the FBI was able to get involved. In West Virginia, law enforcement knew Bhaktapad had to be behind the murder. ISKCON began challenging the philosophies that were being taught at New Vrindaban, and in 1987, the governing body met in India, where they voted to expel Bhaktapad from the society altogether. It was around this time that many followers began exiting the compound in West Virginia.
So, and I would say that all this pressure from the rest of ISKCON came from Steve and what he did, that package, that press release of sorts he put together and sent out worldwide to all the other branches.
And then now he's dead.
Yeah, and because he knew that if he just sent it back there, it wouldn't get any kind of traction.
And this had already been building for a while, too, because the ISKCON leaders, they were pretty upset with the way that Bhaktapad had incorporated Christianity into the teachings at New Vrindaban. And he was using like Psalms and pieces of the Bible, and it was all to recruit new members, but these folks were not happy with that.
No, because it's not what they believe in.
No. Drescher was arrested in the murder of 33-year-old Steve Bryant. He was also charged and convicted in the murder of Charles St. Denny. Recorded phone conversations sealed his fate in the California murder case. Gorby ended up cooperating with police and soon found himself suicided.
Uh-oh, he got Epsteined?
Yep. The Marshall County Sheriff's Office began building their case against Bhaktapad. He was placed on house arrest for nearly 2 years while awaiting charges for racketeering and mail fraud. The government claimed the Swami had amassed over $10.5 million in 4 years' time.
Wow, that's
through these schemes and
that's a lot of money.
Logo infringement and whatever.
Yeah, licensing fee. I mean, he's not paying.
Infringement, yeah.
Yeah, big time.
In 1993, Bhaktapad, finally off house arrest, was to attend a conference in Chicago. At this time, he rented a Winnebago for the trip. He was discovered in an intimate situation with an underage boy by the driver of the RV. This was when his followers at New Vrindaban really abandoned their supreme leader. So after this, he retired to his retreat at Silent Mountain near Littleton, West Virginia. He was convicted in 1994 on one count of racketeering and on various mail fraud charges and was given a 20-year sentence. However, he was released in 2004 at the age of 67 due to some health concerns. And in 2008, Kirtananda fled to India, saying he was not going to stay where he wasn't welcome.
Wow, did he still have this keep most of the money?
I think so.
I mean, it sounds like it.
He died in 2011 of kidney failure.
Wow.
In September of 2000, ISKCON's Child Protective Office launched an investigation into abuse claims at New Vrindaban. The investigation lasted 17 months and found that Kirtananda had molested at least 2 boys. They gave Kirtananda a list of conditions for his reinstatement back to ISKCON, but he never met any of them.
Wow. I would say it was probably a lot more than 2 boys. That's just what they had evidence on.
It was later revealed that during the heyday of New Vrindaban, there were rampant cases of hepatitis, children being abused, with one receiving a broken arm during a beating. An LA-based Krishna member was sentenced to 50 years on child molestation charges, while the 2 leaders of the New Vrindaban school, a man named Larry Gardner and his assistant Frederick DeFrancisco, were charged with sexually abusing a child from the time he was 9 up until he was 13, so for 4 years. When Susan Habel, the child's mother, had confronted Bhaktapad Kirtananda about the abuse allegations, he said to her, "You stupid woman, sex is sex. How much sex have you had in your life?" So he was totally equating consensual adult sex with pedophilia.
Well, yeah, that's what some piece of shit like him would do.
Like in many cults, New Vrindaban's practice was to separate the children from their parents at an early age. So by 5, most children were sent to the school, which was like a year-round boarding school, and they were only allowed to visit their families on occasion. Because parents have no economic independence, the leaders are allowed to make all the decisions for them, especially when it comes to their children.
Well, yeah, I mean, this just comes right out of a handbook for cults. You cut them off from their friends and family outside the cult, and then you also segment families, be it the husband and wife or the parents and children, and it just gives you full control of everything.
It was later detailed that Kirtananda had knowledge of his followers smuggling hashish oil from Pakistan and cocaine from Colombia, with most of the funds going to New Vrindaban or, back to Kirtananda.
Yeah, so there is not only the sex or the different, religious elements he was bringing into it. He's also just straight up illegalities and drugs and such.
Killing for Krishna by Henry Doktorsky, along with various articles from the LA Times and a lot of other newspaper clippings, were part of my research for this story.
Yeah, I'd say this was a rather big deal back in the day.
It was a big deal. And the temple is still in Moundsville, West Virginia. If you want to go there to New Vrindaban, it's open to the public. They do tours. They have a website where you can actually send prayers.
Wait,
to
now,
Krishna.
Is it still active?
It's still active.
Wow. I wonder how long that guy leased that land to them
I think
for.
it's 100 years.
No shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, they that's typical of a lease that is basically no money exchange or like $1 or something like that. Wow. So I can go be part of Krishna?
Well, you can go take a tour, and the temple, the Palace of Gold, is open to visitors. It looks beautiful. I mean, the photos absolutely gorgeous. So definitely, if you were in the West Virginia area, particularly around Moundsville, it'd be a great place to visit. For the aesthetics of the architecture and all the stained glass, semi-precious stones, gold. Sounds amazing.
Yeah, it sounds like I need to take me a pry bar and pop some of those out into my pocket. Yeah, I want to go be part of Clean Krishna is what I call it.
Clean Krishna?
Yup, that's where we don't abuse women or children. So we just have fun. Here, okay, so I'm going to start it right now. It's my sect of Krishna. It's called Clean Krishna. And you don't have to idolize me or anything like that. We're just going to hang out, take it easy.
Chant.
Watch good action movies from like the
I don't think that's Krishna, baby.
late 80s.
That's what they do.
Yeah, so no, this is what I do in my Krishna, because apparently you can do whatever you want. And then, just bring me offerings to a degree of low-priced tall boy beers and cigarettes.
Well, you could be like Killer Mike on his Netflix show, and you could create your Church of Sleep, which was like his buddy, but it'd be Church of Dylan, and people can bring you offerings of beer and cigarettes, maybe like a cheeseburger, some wings.
But here's the thing, I give back.
What do you give back?
Just whatever they're into. If they like, video games, or if they like books or something, I'll buy them stuff when they bring me stuff. It's like, see, here in the Church of Clean Krishna, we're all about helping each other.
Okay, I don't know what you're talking about, but I feel like that Mountain Dew Kickstart has started to soil your brain a bit.
It's kickstarting it.
I have no idea.
It's in the name.
Yeah, people at this point are just like, what?
Yeah, you know what? Somebody's out there taking notes. Like, I'm into this, dude.
Nobody's into this, Dylan.
Okay.
Well, that has been our Hare Krishna murder story.
There's not a lot out there about that story. I mean, as far as podcasts and things like that. And I think you did a good job.
It's a wild tale.
Because you dug way back into the history and gave some pretty good backstory on the main characters. It's just it's something that's played out many times, and it'll play out again in the future. It's just you get ego.
It's a lot of the same repetitive behaviors among cult leaders. They're essentially like con men.
Yeah.
And it's like they have a playbook. They all essentially do the same things.
It's true. And absolute power corrupts absolutely. And you see it time and time again. So yeah, I guess that's it, right?
Well, if you'd like to drop us an email, mountainmurderspodcast@gmail.com. You can sign up at patreon.com, Mountain Murders Podcast, and access some extra bonus content. There's a lot of material there. If you've downloaded all of our episodes, you've made your way through the catalog. If you sign up on Patreon, you're going to get even more Mountain Murders. And don't forget, of course, to check out our podcast, Batshit Crazy. It drops on Tuesdays.
Yes, we talk about the strange and weird.
We'll be back on Wednesday with an episode of Offbeat, our mini Mountain Murders episode. All right, Dylan, you have a great week.
You too.
Tell our listeners goodbye.
Bye.